All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Eric Jr. podcast after an eventful 72 hours for the Philadelphia sports landscape. It's about time that we catch our breaths
Yeah.
and have a conversation about what has transpired. I'm joined here tonight by Chris Lynch. How are you, sir? And how are you doing processing everything now that the weekend is about to be over?
Yeah, it has been a wild roller coaster of a ride for Philly fans. Started off Thursday night with Game 6, and then the NFL draft, of course, followed by the devastating news that we received Friday night about Joel Embiid, minor concussion and orbital bone fracture. We'll get into that, of course. And then here we are, kind of just picking up the pieces as the Eagles rounded out their draft. The Phillies are playing the Mets. That's always a big thing. But I'm ready to get into the meat of this Embiid thing. Where were you when you heard this news, and what were you thinking?
So, some of the more recent notifications of notable acquisitions
Yeah.
or news with the Ben Simmons trade, and now with this, I was casually scrolling. I
Mm,
was not seeking out any information. I was not alerted to it, and that makes it a more of a gut punch when
yes.
you're just scrolling a news feed or a timeline. And I navigate from going to the Eagles feed because I'm all NFL drafted up, and I make my way over to the Sixers, and
Yeah.
I say, all right, I'm going to check out what's going on. And there it is, the Shams report 2 minutes ago
Yeah.
that Joel Embiid is out indefinitely. And it was so deflating. Immediately go to the group chat and have to try to confer and see if anybody else has more information. And we waited the proper amount of time to have this conversation
Yeah.
because we now seem to have an idea of possibly Joel Embiid returning Game 3. But in terms of where I was, I mean, it was almost like you scroll into your work email box and you see a really problematic email,
Yeah.
and there's no way to get around it, and it's going to involve your time.
Yeah.
And after you see it, you can't unsee it, and
That's how I felt as well. Like it was something that I wanted to just be able to put my phone down and ignore it for the rest of the night,
yep.
but I just couldn't. And like you're texting all these people and just like you're on Twitter.
You're
It's just
truly doom scrolling. Sorry
yes.
to interrupt you,
No,
but that's
absolutely.
exactly what it is.
That's what it felt like. That's what it felt like. And immediately your mind goes to the worst possible scenario that he's done. He's done for the playoffs. And if it's like that 2018 injury where he misses 3 weeks, and you're doing the math. Okay, if it's 3 weeks, oh damn, oh no, that's not very good.
It's a really jarring realization
Yeah,
to have
absolutely.
navigated so much,
Yes.
and
After the epiphany of Game 6, and where they put it all together,
yes,
and Embiid is on top of the world. He overcomes all these questions about him, and to have that happen is just you feel for yourself. Obviously, you feel for the fan base, and then you think more personally about Embiid and what he's gone through and what to get to this stage and how it must have felt in that checkup, receiving that information and just the 5 stages that he has to go through.
after already
Yeah.
having gone through so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're exactly right. To feel for Joel is where you start, and then you begin to process, well, what happened that led to this,
Yeah.
and then you start going back in time and asking yourself, why is he still in the game, or how freak things like this happen all the time. That was really tough to go back and watch the footage because it doesn't look good.
No.
It's really not a good look for Siakam, and you can say all you want that it's a basketball play. I think that's bullshit. And I
Yeah.
think that, there was certainly an intent to land a blow, whether or not it was to try to injure somebody. Obviously, I don't think so. But
Right.
really a gut punch to watch that play a couple times over and just how unnecessary it was and
Yeah.
how it's so emblematic of what we've gone through as a fan base time and time again, specifically with this team and specifically with this guy. It
Yeah.
was so much compounded. It was like it was hitting me in slow motion over and over. I was having flashbacks of just like previous times of
Yeah.
just like getting your knees cut out from underneath of you right as you're about to hit the next checkpoint.
Yeah.
So clearly, based off the news from today, it is not dire.
It's not as bad as we had initially hoped. The report is that they hope to avoid surgery, which obviously makes his return much more likely. We don't know when that would happen, but we know he's out indefinitely for now. That means the first 2 games done. He's not going to Miami. What comes after that, we'll just have to wait and see.
So you want to talk a little bit about just like let's start a little bit more positively now that
Yeah.
we've talked about how we digested and processed the injury news, and
Yeah.
hopefully we're going to return to that at the end of the conversation. Game 6,
Yeah.
NFL draft is on.
Yep.
You're completely focused on the Sixers, and then something miraculous happens after halftime.
Yeah.
After it was a 1-point game
Yeah.
with the result very much in the balance.
It was a dogfight.
Some-
Absolutely.
Something clicked
Yes.
with the best 5 players on the Sixers, and they put on a performance, specifically Tyrese Maxey in that third quarter,
Yes.
along with James Harden. Everybody stepped up in the biggest moment, and it was really
Yep.
incredible to watch.
Yep. Danny Green's hitting threes. Tobias
Carried us in the
Harris
first half.
carried us in the first half. Tobias Harris is grabbing boards with a ferocity that we have not seen since he's come to Philadelphia. Joel Embiid is doing everything on the defensive end, putting in a vintage Joel Embiid defensive performance, I think, and really stifling that Raptors offense.
Huge bounce back.
Couldn't do anything in the second half. Couldn't get anywhere. They were running through mud, it felt like. And then on the offense for the Sixers, James Harden is hitting step back threes. Tyrese Maxey, like you said, has that explosion. He hits 3 threes in the quarter. They go up, I think, 19 at the third quarter, and then Doc runs it back for the fourth, and they run up the score. And every couple of minutes, you're thinking, okay, are the Raps going to make a run? Nope. Step back 3. Nope. Tyrese Maxey dribble drive. They just keep scoring, and that's what they couldn't do last year. And that's the biggest difference from this team versus last year's team. Is this year they just wouldn't stop scoring, and they just kept putting the pressure on. They kept attacking. We all noticed that they would wait a little bit. They would be running the clock a little bit, but now they have the playmakers to go get a bucket at the end of the shot clock. Whereas last year they were scrambling to do so, right? So it just, everything came together that game 6, the second half particularly, like you said. It just felt like an exhale for the team, for the players, for the fan base, for the city.
A lot of people watching the draft that I think were grateful.
Yes,
Started
absolutely.
to change their focus, without
Yeah.
having to worry with a lot of anxiety and stress.
Of course, for all those Eagles beat writers out there, the podcasters that focus on that side of the Philly sports landscape, they were certainly grateful they didn't have to divert their attention too much.
They had time to settle all in before a huge Eagles trade.
Of
I mean,
course.
the night really was just incredible. But I know I'm sidetracking. What you're saying is absolutely true. It's just a matter of is that it? Like, we choked the life out of a team at the
Yeah.
end. We had a
On
player.
the road, like pressure's on. We stepped up. Every single player of that starting 5 contributed in very meaningful, direct ways, and it was something to behold.
And I think you got to say that the one guy that made it all, James Harden, in
Yeah.
that game. We haven't had that half-court initiator in the playoffs to get those buckets when the other team is trying to make their run.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what James Harden was able to help do, or at least help facilitate in this game. And that was a calming presence in that when they officially went over the hump of a double-digit lead, it was his steadying presence that seemed to kind of not allow it to be
slip,
diminished
yeah,
again.
to slip,
So
absolutely.
that was calming and like reaffirming in a
Yes.
way to see that.
Yeah, and you could also tell the Raptors pretty much ran out of gas at the end.
Every minute you
Yeah.
could tell that just some of the body language and obviously the crowd being dead quiet and
Yeah.
completely taken out of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, the Joel Embiid airplane, which was a moment that should be so incredible
Yeah.
and so cathartic,
Yep.
and yet now is marred
Yes.
by all this unnecessary,
Yep.
Injury.
Yep. The relationship between Embiid and the fans in Toronto had been,
That was the way to
Tough.
close it out.
yeah.
Is with his airplane and beating your ass in your building, being
Yeah.
able to move on and say,
That's
I'm,
it.
I'm the one of the best players in the league.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was supposed to go.
Yes.
But because it's a Philly team, it can't be that way.
Right.
Because it's him, it
And-
can't be that
And
way.
Siakam comes down the other end and he flails, he brings his elbows up high and he moves, and Embiid rightfully gets in his way. And originally they call the foul on Embiid. They go double check.
So
back.
bad, the officials.
Yeah, they were
in this series. They are
Yeah.
out of sorts. I don't even necessarily blame them,
Yeah.
but they are completely whacked. They're
Yeah.
completely off their rockers.
Yeah, agreed. Not even like towards any one team, like
Just the inconsistency.
just the inconsistency overall. I agree. They eventually called an offensive foul.
The amount of reviews in the
Yeah.
first half of this game,
Yeah,
we talked about
absolutely.
that. Everyone went, the Raptors didn't get an advantage off of it, and it
Yeah.
just felt like it felt like there was, a tangible edge given to one team over the other.
Yeah. And then, you think that that's it. And the game ends, and Embiid and Siakam, they have their moment. And it all is well and good, right? Uh, the Raptors are going home. The Sixers on to the next round, right? On to Miami. I'm in my and we're focused on the draft at that point, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it should have been. And unfortunately, we get the news that we did that Joel Embiid's going to miss a few games. That his he told reporters that he felt like his face was broken, and it turns out that it was. And that's just like it's such a bad way to it just leaves such a bad taste in your mouth on what should have been such a cathartic and like exhaling night where like the Sixers did it. They finally closed it off. Like they made it way harder than it had to
Against
be.
that team.
Against that
in
team.
the first round.
Yeah, I mean,
Got tested, punched back.
sure, all that stuff, and just the way it ends with the crowd chanting F Embiid, and it just, I don't know.
Not a good look for the fans or the organization.
No,
And
absolutely.
I don't even really want to say much else about it. I mean,
Right.
in terms of the lessons from that Raptors series,
Yeah.
games 1 and game 6, they absolutely just obliterated the Raptors.
Yeah.
And then in between, there was some really distressing
Yeah.
performances by some of the best players in big moments. Game
Yeah.
5 certainly
Particularly,
is something that worries you moving forward. If you're being honest with yourself about this team, if that can happen.
Yeah.
We just saw earlier on Sunday, Boston versus the Bucks, and
Yeah.
Boston just set a record for like the least amount of twos made in a game, or
Yeah.
the second most ever, or whatever. So you just don't know in the playoffs, I guess sometimes. But you certainly have some red flags with the Sixers team.
course.
I would argue that sans Embiid injury, seeing this team go up against a well-coached, athletic first-round team
Yeah.
will stand to benefit them. Maybe steal one against a Miami team that has easier players to exploit offensively, and guys like Hero and Robinson and
For sure.
a couple others. So it's not as stringent as what was happening with the Raptors, where by the end, if Van Vliet's not out there, every single guy was just kind of annoying you, nagging you, but none of them had offensive potency.
Right.
Where that's flipped here, where you're going to have offensively potent. You got 6th man of the year. You've got Jimmy Butler who can get high. You got all these guys. But at the same time, you're going to have chances to still run up the score and get yourself as many points as you can on efficiency.
It's going to be a really interesting series because the Heat are, in a lot of ways, they're a lot different than the Raptors, like you said. They're not like built to play the one way. The Heat are a little bit of a different animal. They can attack you in a variety of ways. They have proven veteran scorers in the playoffs. But like you said, they also, they have a lot of one-way players that aren't going to be able to cause you problems defensively. So that's definitely something that the James Harden led 76ers can exploit. And that's just like where we're going to be for the start of this series. That's just where we are. Now, the one bit of good news is that we know Kyle Lowry will also be missing game 1. So that takes away from their offensive repertoire, right? Like he's their playmaker. He's the guy who initiates their offense. Without him, they can be a little ball stagnant. They can be a little like hero ball,
Hot and cold a little bit, yeah. He's
like
a stabilizer for
ISO
sure.
stuff. Which the Sixers I think can match up with pretty well. They got hopefully if you're doing that you can really lock in on those guys.
Yeah, and I to get it off the top, it's clearly another example where the opposing coach, there's
Yes.
an advantage to the other team.
For sure.
And Eric Spoelstra, arguably
Even-
the best in the league.
Yeah, even more so than Nick
Than the
Nurse.
previous rounds.
Spo,
So
Spo is amazing.
So let's get that out of the way. You're also going up against a guy in Jimmy Butler who
is a maniac.
is a one-on-one and also has never won, which adds a certain level of fire to guys.
Of course.
And I would say this: it's James Harden and company.
Yes.
For the first 2 games,
Yes.
and that's going to be quite a viewing experience.
Yes.
There are several things to consider here. The first thing that came to mind is I just wanted to mention what James Harden
Yeah.
was doing in previous years when he was the go-to guy in his supporting cast, during those pieces. Because I would offer to compare the following. I think in this first 2-game sample, Matisse Thybulle might be like your PJ Tucker
Yes.
version of the old James Harden teams who, needed that specific defensive piece, who hypothetically would shoot at a decent clip. I also think that your B-ball Paul
Oh boy.
could be a Clint Capella with a willing three.
Wow.
Okay,
I mean, this is some great stuff.
That's where I want to start, and then I want to hit you with a little bit of Danny Green and George Niang mixed into one guy. And could I please have an Eric Gordon?
Okay.
And I think
Here we
we're
go.
cooking with gas now. And I think if I visualize it through that lens, these first two games, I can turn back the clock with James Harden and say, yeah, this guy can get 30 and 14
Yeah.
and get us one of these. No doubt, man.
he
We got
can-
the
yeah.
we got the pieces.
If he has that in him, then I like our chances a lot more. The one person you did not mention, and we would be remiss to, is that this is not just the James Harden and company. This is the James Harden and Tyrese Maxey and company. He
That's the best name we could think of.
Yeah, Maxey is the guy that can really. He's the one who won that March matchup against the Heat that we'll talk about later. He's the guy who had the better, arguably, statistical first round. Shooting wise, certainly. Scoring wise, of course. Maxey is without Embiid. He's someone who's gonna have to carry a pretty huge scoring role, which we've seen him struggle at times when he's forced to become the scorer and he's not when he's the primary option.
How defenses respond to that.
How defenses, especially one as smart as Miami with a lot of long, tough defenders. That's going to be interesting to watch. They switch everything, so there's not going to be a lot of pick and roll opportunities. They have long, rangy defenders, just like the Raptors did. So it's going to be something to watch. Whether James can get some of that scoring touch, can he, giving him the usage, is that enough to, can he pump those numbers in, even if it's slightly less efficient? We just need him to score points. It doesn't matter how efficient he is to a certain extent, and then Max the same way. Can those guys score into the 30s? Can one of them do it? Because that's what we're going to need, basically, to steal a game in Miami. And that's, I think, the Sixers has to be the Sixers' mindset. Well, let's steal one of them, We got these 2 games down in Miami. If we can take one, we can put the pressure on them, and then we can see what happens with the big guy when and if he comes back.
If you're going to steal one, it's got to be game one.
Game one, must win.
Game one is the one. Game one is the one to win.
Okay.
And by your terms, it is indeed a must win. You say Tyrese Maxey, and I agree. It's just that we've seen him in at least for a couple games in a playoff series.
Yeah.
We've seen it this year and last year. When you think about the Atlanta series and the juice he provided, this guy in the playoffs has proven the ability to score. Mm-hmm. So that is his basement of possible performance. We already know and can count on that.
He has to. Yeah.
That's why I mentioned James Harden as truly more of let's do all the stuff, your bread and butter, and I guess that's clearly the high, pick and rolls and getting those switches and getting him to the free throw line probably. Yeah. But I don't know. Can you do some more creative things with him? Now that
they're going to have to.
That you have these young athletic bigs who are going to be very, or at least hopefully, you're going to be playing with some younger athletic guys who will, in theory, be able to do some stuff.
Let's talk about that now. Let's get to that. What is the center rotation right going to be? Because we know Doc had that little episode at the end of the season when the other team has a big 5, they're going to play DeAndre, and when they have a small, they're going to play Paul.
What would you call Bam Adebayo?
He's a hybrid, man. That's the question. He plays big, but he's only 6'10", and he gives up, he's only 260, maybe even less. I don't know what Doc Rivers views him as. I'm fascinated to see. He could go either way. I would play Paul Reed just because he's had the minutes.
Yeah.
He's played well.
Start him.
Maybe. We've seen Doc in the past start guys like Andre Drummond or DeAndre Jordan in non-Embiid games, and then they go to Paul later, and it's just a matter of who has the hot hand. I would not be shocked to see DeAndre Jordan. What about Charles Bassey? Is he going to be an option in this series?
Practiced fully, supposedly, recently.
He's practicing, but he has not been with the team. He's not been practicing with the team a lot. That would certainly be, quite an adjustment for someone like Doc Rivers. And then there's also Paul Millsap, who played a lot heavily in that aforementioned March matchup without Embiid, without Harden. The center rotation was DeAndre Jordan for 24 minutes, Paul Millsap for 24 minutes. Now we expect Paul Reed to play at least. He's going to play. We're past the point of wondering whether he's going to get on the floor, but for how much and who else is going to be in there is something to see. Now, Miami, they have two traditional centers. They got Bam Adebayo, and then they got Dwayne Dedmon, who again is a big, but he plays. He's a stretch five. He plays out the 3-point line. He's not going to do a lot of posting up.
That's like an ideal DeAndre Jordan.
It would be
there.
If he wasn't shooting threes, it would be.
I don't know.
But he's going to drag DeAndre out of the paint. That's going to cause problems. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is.
Fascinated because we have kept these roster spots
Yes.
for so long that you have four
Yep, one, two,
other
three,
centers that are not Joel Embiid on this roster, and there's very high likelihood that all of them are going to get playoff minutes in the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah.
3 of them not having played in months.
Yes.
It is. You couldn't write it. It's ridiculous. And here's the thing. I'm looking at Charles Bassey. I'm very interested in that. He got that one November game against Denver.
Yeah.
Played really well. Never heard from again. Doc after the game is like, yep, my assistant coaches are in my ear telling me this guy's ready. This guy's ready. Just falling on deaf ears apparently because Doc never did anything about it. Look, I said this about Bebop Paul months ago, and it would have been crazy other than seeing the last couple games of the playoffs and then going into the playoffs. Paul Reed just played pretty damn well in the first round of the playoffs. Yeah. I think it'd be really stupid, and even Doc would probably recognize to cut his opportunity.
No, he's going to play for sure.
Even if not increase it. I think not increasing it, maybe you could talk me into that. Paul Reed's still getting 14 to 18 minutes.
Yeah, limiting because he is just so raw as a player, and the playoffs are a different animal in terms of like ratcheting up the pressure. And it's not like, and we don't want to misrepresent the truth here. Paul Reed made a lot of mistakes in that Toronto series. He was not perfect.
Sure.
But he played with energy, and he played fast and hard, and he did enough positive stuff to make it like a net neutral, basically. And which is what you want out of a backup center, but your full-time center, I don't know if that's enough. If not limiting the mistakes is enough.
Well, and more than that, I think just in regards to his play, obviously he made mistakes, but the thing I remember is that he did things that no other backup center for Joel Embiid had ever done.
Right.
Picking a guy's pocket and leading to a fast break on the other, finishing off of a miss, a really athletic finish around multiple guys, actually finishing, not just halfway dunking the ball like DeAndre Jordan. All right. We've seen Paul Reed do some really good stuff.
Yes.
So, I'm just fascinated to see who he's going to start. I weirdly think Paul Millsap. It strikes me,
Absolutely.
A guy who's like right on Dedmon's level of like he can shoot it and maybe will shoot it, but we're not really hesitant to let him shoot it. So especially when they're trying to exploit matchups, this is going to be such a matchup series. With them trying to go at Maxey on offense and us trying to go at Hero. And
yeah, absolutely. In that case, it will be a very interesting series because, those two guys are so important to their teams, and Hero didn't play particularly well in the Atlanta series. He didn't shoot the ball very well at all, and Maxey's going to be such a huge part of our team that's going to struggle to generate points. That's just a massive who wins that is very important.
Back to the bigs. If we're talking about the parallel performances on each team, we just mentioned two. That's one guard on each team that we just mentioned.
Yeah.
That we're gonna see how that specific who gets the better of who there. When we're talking about the Miami bigs versus the bigs that we are gonna throw out there, how big will that gap of play or the impact on these results of these games be?
Presumably pretty big.
Bam Adebayo and Dwayne Dedmon against our 4 centers.
Yeah. I mean, take your pick. It's going to be a mismatch no matter what. Now, Bam has not had the year I think a lot of people expected him to have. A lot of people have been waiting him to make that jump into the top 5 center conversation. He hasn't really done that. He's still a really useful and productive player. He's efficient.
Productive and solid.
Yeah, he's very solid. And he doesn't make mistakes, which is, I think, where the Sixers centers are going to, they'll be fine on 85% of the plays, but they'll turn the ball over. They'll commit fouls that they don't need to, they'll do moving screens, that kind of stuff. Bam doesn't do that.
Yeah,
and he's also just a really smart passer, and He just doesn't make any of those mistakes.
Classic Heat guy.
Yeah, classic Heat guy. Absolutely works hard, et cetera, et cetera.
Culture.
Culture, sure. Another guy that I want to talk about, because the difference between the Raptors series and this one, I think he's going to be a big part of it, is Matisse Thybulle. Now you mentioned him earlier as kind of a PJ Tucker esque player. He only played 43 minutes in the Raptors series. Obviously, that's just the away game or the home game, 3 home games, of course. He's going to have a much more important role on this team. I think so, just because there's more guys for him to guard. In Toronto, like it didn't really make sense having him out there because
No one guy.
there was no one guy that you really need to focus on.
And that you were willing to incur his offensive cost for
Yeah.
his defensive productivity.
Yeah, but with with the offense that the Miami guards are poised to create, like it's those guys initiating the offense. It's
And
the
if
guards.
you can sick Matisse
If you-
Thybulle on one of those guys for a half
Absolutely.
and minimize their damage exponentially.
Absolutely.
Now we're cooking.
And you look at like, okay, even if they stick Hero on him as like to hide on defense, he can still move around screens. He can still attack the basket. He can still do all these off ball cuts. That's going to at least force Hero to move. So it's not exactly a dead weight on offense. Whereas in against Toronto, like he would have had to be sitting in the corner and like waiting for the ball to come to him. That would probably never come because it would get picked off. So his role in this series is probably outside of the bigs, probably the biggest change. Now we saw the starting 5 of Embiid, Maxey, Harden, Danny Green, and Tobias. They played a ton. They played so many minutes, more so. Those 5 all total. Danny Green was the lowest at 188. The next for the Sixers was 105 for George Niang. So it was a pretty big drop off. And then those top 4 guys all played just over 30 minutes every game. It was Doc really relied on those core 4 players. And they played great in the Toronto series. All of them, like statistically, like right where you want them, shooting percentages, everything where you want it to be. Can you count on that without Embiid? They're going to need to do what they did, and then even step it up a level, because you're looking at the averages. Maxey 21 points, Harden 19, Tobias 18, which is like when you have Embiid there, that's perfect. That's what you want them at. Without Embiid, they're gonna have to do a little bit more, which is like, now you're getting to the down trickle effect of Embiid not being there and those points having to be replaced. When you do the math like that, they got their work cut out for them.
Yeah, I think without question. You mentioned Maxey earlier. I think Matisse Thybulle is the X factor.
Sure.
I think because coming off arguably his worst game in Game 5, it was after he missed both of those free throws. It was really, you could just tell, and with the crowd, it was a tough moment.
Sure.
And he needs to bounce back in a big way. And this is a series that he can do that. So I
Absolutely.
believe that he will get the run. I'm interested to see if he starts. A lot of miles on Danny in that first round. He's really been carrying you. I mean, his shooting the past couple of months has really, right towards the last, quarter of the season.
Yeah,
he
into
seemed
the
to really
playoffs,
turn a corner, and he was tremendous. So, but how much can you expect out of that? That guy needs a dip in his minutes, and we're not going to be able to provide that because Joel Embiid is out, and we need all hands on deck.
Yes.
So I am fascinated to see Matisse Thybulle. Can he help them go to maybe some more smaller, more unconventional lineups? Maybe when they go to that
Eventually,
go to that 2-3 zone, is
Yeah.
that something where when he's out there, it's just like it's swarming? I'll be fascinated to see. I think he is no question the X factor, and I expect him to bounce back because he left a pretty bad taste in your mouth with the previous series.
Now, the one like caveat that people have been pointing to about Joel Embiid missing these first couple games is that previous matchup in March. I just want to touch on that just to kind of like show how ridiculous it is to talk about like regular season matchups.
Okay, get through this
In
quick.
terms of playoffs. In that March matchup, the Sixers obviously pulled off the big upset win over Miami without Embiid or James Harden. just to go through the numbers and like why it's unlikely to use that again. Shake Milton had 20 points. Furkan Korkmaz played 27 minutes. He was 4 of 7 from 3. He had 18 points. Um, George Yang started. Tyrese Maxey had 28. And the Heat, I think, shot 30% from 3. If all those things happen, yeah, okay. I think we're good. The Sixers are in pretty good shape. Um, are any of those things likely to happen? I don't know. Maybe Maxey hitting 28, and maybe that's it, I think.
Maybe a cold shooting night. I don't know. It doesn't sound so crazy to me. I mean, yeah, that was. I mean, if you remember the end of that game, the Tyrese Maxey breakaway layup
Yes.
at the end. I mean, it was that and the Memphis game. I mean,
Yes.
there were some incredible regular season games this year.
Yeah.
So
This is going to be something that Maxey has to, as this is a step in Maxey's development. We talk about it all the time, how great he's been. I don't want to say it's easy being the secondary option, but when the pressure's not on you, you can move more freely about the game. You can kind of ease yourself into it. He's going to be asked to carry the scoring load pretty much from the jump. Can he do that? Is he up to the task? I'm fascinated to find out. I'm not going to doubt him, but I think it's going to be a challenge for him.
yeah, and while there certainly will be an expectation of him elevating his play, I think more of the pressure will be on James Harden.
Yeah.
Because he has been very deferential to Maxey and saying, early on, while he was playing here, saying it is your responsibility to get going early, to unlock everything. And when Tyrese doesn't have it going early, that's where these games might just get out of hand really quick. These first two, if Tyrese doesn't have it going on, and James doesn't want to try to revert to trying to
James,
turn the clock back to Houston James Harden and try to take over. I mean, what does he have? 30-point game since being here? Come on, if I were a betting man, you give me the odds on James Harden dropping 30 in one of these two first games. I'm taking it, and I'm taking it with big money.
3 days rest.
3 days rest, it's plenty for that hammy. And I know it's Miami, but he knows he needs to steal the first one. If he steals the first one, then he can go out after, and that'll be a great time. And then we just we lose game 2. It's fine.
That's
but
fine.
You got to get the first one.
Yeah.
And you got to bring it game 1. Yeah. I'm looking at him. I'm looking at James Harden. The reason that he is here, he is a superstar with an S. He does not, dribble the air out of the ball and then actually have to pass out of it because he doesn't have any more moves and he's old. That's not him.
Right.
At least not the one I've seen.
Yes. Let's hope not. Let's hope he brings it and the Sixers are able to pull one out in Miami. Until now, to wrap up the Sixers talk, this Miami Heat series preview, we talked about the importance of stealing one early, right? What is your expectation for the big man? When is he coming back? What are you thinking in your mind?
The report today of game 3, my gut says
that seems early.
It seems a little too early. My gut says like game 5.
Yeah.
And they need a little extra time. He's got the concussion too.
Yeah.
And you would hope it doesn't have anything to do with the performance, but if they could somehow win that first game, and give him that extra couple days that he needs. I mean, it's a legitimate. You don't want to have long-term, damage or problems with your face.
That's
guy like Joel Embiid, huge sponsor and just huge, gregarious, incredible extroverted, bigger than life personality. You know what I'm dealing with something like that. Basketball, we see how this injury happened.
Yeah.
Something else were to happen, and he gets dinged up and we're down 3-1. I feel pretty shitty about it.
It's not like this series is going to be any less physical. Like, this
Right.
is still going to be a tough drag, knock them out series. Like, you're going to have to wrestle it away from these guys.
You're telling me if we get our asses kicked the first 2 games, you're bringing him back with all the pressure and rushing him back when it's like clearly it doesn't look like we can match up? I don't know. My prediction is game 5, and I'm going to stay with
Game 5, that seems about right.
What do you say?
I'll say game 5 as well.
Okay.
Just to make it even.
The fact that he's coming back, we didn't know. We were in a state of purgatory the past 12, 16 hours.
I had him dead and buried. I did not think he was going to come back for at least this round at all.
Or
basically.
the 3-week template from last time around
Yeah.
that. It's too late. It's too far.
That's too far. If Embiid can avoid surgery and if this injury progresses in a certain manner, obviously we hope to see him back on the court as soon as possible. But we don't want to, we want to stress that he needs to take care of himself too. Like, we can't rush him back. This is his orbital bone. This is right under his eye. We can't be messing with his nerves under his eye.
And
like
he
that.
came back, from the other one and was
thumb,
fine. Came back with the thumb, right? I mean, I don't know. It's just you worry about how much can one guy take.
Yes.
You truly like a guy like this, and just like the weight of the city and like expectation in the NBA community, and just like
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, and it's not just like him coming back and oh he's MVP again. Like this stuff takes a toll, and like how much can this guy expected to
With
be
no
moved
margin for error at this point.
Yeah.
He comes back, we're down 2 games. It's like
Yeah.
he has to just come out and be incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to really be prepared for a wide spectrum of possibility.
I agree. Okay, now do you want to move off the Sixers? That was a good long discussion. Big second round series coming up. Game tomorrow night. Hopefully they can steal it. Let's move on to the other part of Thursday night. Big night. Eagles draft. They end up trading up for Jordan Davis, defensive tackle out of Georgia, and then they make the big shocking move. They trade their 18th pick to the Titans for AJ Brown, one of the best young wide receivers in the NFL. How did you feel on that night going to bed?
I mean, I didn't want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Thursday night. I was feeling so incredible, and I knew that the next day would have no chance of being as good. Little did I know it would lead to just tremendous heartache.
Dude, yeah.
But overall, I mean, the viewing experience, you just finish up watching the Sixers clinch against the hated Raptors. We don't know the injury news yet. You turn your attention right to the draft. There we are trading 3 picks to move up 3 spots to go get this, once in a generation type athlete at, Jordan Davis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you trade for AJ Brown like 30 minutes later. I mean, it was the timing. It seemed like it was a sequence of events that was planned for the Philadelphia sports consumer.
Yeah.
It was tremendous.
Yeah.
And for them to trade for a star wide receiver who's 24 years old, has had 1,000-yard, seasons, and is coming from a run-heavy offense, has just like across the board rave reviews and just like acceptance as a top wide receiver.
Yeah.
And then you go ahead and give him his 4-year, $100 million deal for $25 million a year, 57 guarantee.
It's not bad, right?
It's what you do when you have those number ones. You pay him like a number one. The NFL wide receiver market, woke up to what the NBA was doing and said, we're like the equivalent of your shooting guards or whatever you have, Look at Andrew Wiggins and those guys getting paid. Come on now.
Exactly. Massive, both franchise-altering moves that will, like, the imprint on this team, like, we talked about earlier in the offseason, them kind of slow rolling this offseason, it being kind of a holding pattern. They're stockpiling picks for next year. Like, oh, they're not really going, we didn't add any high-profile free agents other than Hassan Reddick. It was a shock to me that, I mean, one, you go up to get Jordan Davis. I love that move. That's something that we had talked about before, like moving up to get a top prospect as it was falling down, and just for like you're not giving up any premium picks, and you get a guy that is like you said, a generational athletic specimen at defensive tackle, someone who can be a linchpin for your defense. I think that makes all the sense in the world. And then you package that with, you look at the board, the wide receivers are all falling, right? They're gone basically by 15. There's one left, Treylon Burks, ironically, who the Texans take at 18. What do you think about the value of Treylon Burks versus AJ Brown? Obviously, one is the proven commodity. The other going to be on a rookie scale contract for 4 years. What do you think about, like, if Treylon Burks is the real deal, which we obviously don't know, there's risk involved, like, who's getting the better value? What do you think?
I think we're getting the better value because of, you still have the prime of AJ Brown.
Sure.
Burks.
24 years old. This is his 4th year in the NFL, right? Like 3 years before he's had 1,000 yards, and then 860. So not bad.
And in that Titans offense.
Yeah.
It was weird going from, you think you have this surplus of picks to, after the AJ Brown deal, it's like we just used like 6 picks or something like that.
For those two guys.
And we got, Jordan Davis and AJ Brown, which is fine. And those were the right deals. It was just a lot going on. And then later in the second half of the draft, you really felt it a little bit more when you didn't have those picks in a supposedly really deep draft. But overall, like, I think Treylon Burks obviously has the potential. He's a similar type of, build and, from a big conference, kind of a one-note guy, though. Doesn't have, like, top-end speed and just is that big body.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see AJ Brown, it seems like the Titans possibly, it's reported that they might have lowballed
Yeah.
AJ Brown with the contract, which is just really questionable. Who else are you gonna, splurge for if not a guy like that at the premier position with the production
Yeah.
to back it up? So that was a bit baffling. And overall, for this Eagles team to have a studly stud number one wide receiver, line him up, count on
Yeah.
multiple 100-yard games throughout the season, just like
Absolutely.
every other Sunday, putting up numbers, proven commodity. Now it's just a matter of making sure he's got the quarterback to give it to him. And whether
Yeah,
it's Jalen
absolutely.
Hurts or someone else in the future, we got this guy for 5 years now? So
Yes. Yeah.
we got one position completely solidified.
Yeah.
And I would argue outside of the secondary, this team is looking a little scary.
Yeah, it definitely like you're looking at where the team kind of pushed their assets into it. You saw the wide receiver, the defensive line, of course, and then finally, the team takes a linebacker with a premier pick, a day 2 pick. Jake, how did you feel when at long last Nakobe Dean falls to you at 83? What goes through your head?
Look.
Finally, you're the linebacker guy, man. Now,
Lots of guys.
not lots of guys, of course. And when you were thinking, okay, who's going to be their day 2 linebacker? Never in your wildest dreams did you think that this guy was going to fall the way to you, right?
No, I had no reason to believe.
Of course.
A guy like Nakobe Dean with his, reviews and track record and athletic testing and
Yeah.
every production, whatever you want to name. For you to get him at 83, I almost don't want to give as much credit because it's such a no-brainer.
Yeah.
If you hadn't, you could only be chastised. You can't even get the credit for taking this guy.
Right.
It really seemed like an inflection point. They were so obsessed with getting their center of the future and Cam
Yeah.
Jugers or whatever. So good on you, Howie. We get that you have your little quirks,
Yeah.
whatever. If you want to
Offensive
reach,
line, of
you want to
course.
reach and not get the positional value in the second round of a safety or someone else. Whatever, man.
Yeah. Or a defensive end that seemingly would round out that.
Sure, but in your mind, you just visualize that they take Dean in the second and then get the center in the third, and you think everything's fine.
Yeah, right.
You finally get, he's a little small. There's definitely a gray shroud of,
Injury issues, right?
yeah, just unknown surrounding his physical status, but he's ready to play. He says he's not hurt.
And we'll find out soon when he comes in.
Find out
right?
soon. It might be a guy that has lingering stuff, but plays most 13 out of 16 games or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or 17, whatever.
And as a 3rd round pick, you think what he's going to give you versatility wise on the defense. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Sure, and it seemed like a bit of an inflection point in that was certainly a place where they could have traded back and recouped some of those additional draft assets at the end of the round, or at the end of the draft rather. But for them to just say no, don't overthink it. It was a good example of Howie Roseman in the past. The one critique is that he definitely overthinks some stuff. The Jalen Rager thing, completely overthought it. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, overthought it. So for him to not overthink it here, I guess in that way, I'll give him credit for that.
Sure.
'Cause that's not always a guarantee.
Yeah.
And this guy is going to he's going to have such a visual impact
Yeah.
right away, which it's just exciting
For
to
the
get.
fans, it's very
It's exciting to get when you already made those other moves. Where you're
Yeah.
kind of like, oh, it's coming at the cost of not getting some of these other players.
Right.
But I look at him and I say, man, you also get him from this draft. You just look at those 3 player acquisitions and each of those 3, like, wow, that's so much better than just a conglomerate or like a group of middling players of like
Right.
6 or 7 of them.
Right. In years past, you're hoping like maybe 1 or 2 of these guys has an impact. And you look at
Strick Johnson in the 7.
Yeah,
That's what I said.
You look at Jordan Davis, you look at Nakobe Dean, and then AJ Brown. Like you're looking at 3 impact players day one
At
at the
such
very
important
least,
positions.
at very premier positions. Now the one position or positional group that was ignored like an ugly stepchild, the secondary. This has been the 2nd draft in a row where Howie has not, moved on at some of these guys to address that position. At 13, when we traded up, I know me and you were thinking, oh, maybe it's Kyle Hamilton.
I certainly thought it was.
I was with you. He was right there at the top of my board. He could have been come in day 1 starter, play every snap. Certainly more so than Jordan Davis, who's going to be rotated in with that deep defensive tackle room. What did you think of ignoring those holes in the secondary for focusing on these premier positions?
I guess it just comes down to the philosophical
Yeah.
beliefs of the organization, and you've got guys like Fletcher Cox and obviously you got some young guys in Teron Jackson and Milton Williams and Josh Sweat, but like you look at the future, and
Yeah.
if you want to solidify a group for the future, doing Milton Williams and adding that in, and then maybe getting an edge guy next year, now you have that young core to move forward with.
Yeah.
Where maybe that's more important to you as an organization
Yeah.
to have that position group locked up, as opposed to saying, well, if we take the safety now, that's supposedly a great safety and ends up not being that great, then we're completely still bad, or
Right.
left without premier players at several important positions.
Yeah.
So to kind of shore up the run defense
Yeah.
and to have a guy that's going to make all the other guys' jobs easier at your defensive line, something that you've always valued, maybe overvalued, certainly
Could
doesn't
make that argument,
certainly doesn't surprise me. So
No.
in that regard, when I took Jordan Davis, it was like a bit of disappointment than I thought, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's not something that I was bewildered by.
Sure. And like someone, the centerpiece of the Georgia defense, like someone who like just absolutely changes the way offenses can run, like when he's in there. That, like you said, that's a bit of a no-brainer to take somebody like that.
His floor
Yeah.
is so high.
Yeah, it's incredible, and then also has that really high ceiling if he can put it all together and be that pass rusher that he wasn't asked to be at Georgia. Like like he did a lot of stuff that was focused on stopping the run. If you bring him in with these other guys and you let him kind of turn loose a little bit, I wonder what that might do to his numbers.
Yeah. Oh, sure. And that's a good example of like, well, obviously he didn't have the sack production in college, and this is kind of unprecedented if
Sure.
he does have that
Yeah.
in the NFL. But it'll be such a fun experiment to kind of like long term, the next like 4 or 5 years, just
Yeah.
see what happens with a guy like this. And
Yeah.
it'll be used almost as an example in the future drafts for saying, should this guy have gone higher, or should they have waited on this guy because it turned out being more of a project,
Yeah.
and not as much of a seamless fit as they thought.
It's been said, around the NFL that there's basically no way that this guy isn't good.
Right.
Isn't like at least, basement level.
NFL
He's a
player.
productive NFL player,
Mhm.
right? Someone you can early down guy. He'll stop the run, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, and then so when you look at the team now, you got AJ Brown, Devonta Smith. Oh, I love saying that. I love imagining
And
those
Dallas
two,
Goedert.
and Dallas Goedert, of course. I'm just just like that's like it's been so long since we've
It's a
had
weight
like,
off the shoulder.
yeah, it's been so long since we've had like a full offensive skill position group, right? Like
Yeah.
you can check all the boxes, okay? Like the running backs, okay, they're all pretty good. You got a couple options there, and like two stud wide receivers who you expect to be able to go to at key points in the game, and they're going to get you tough yards. That's just really exciting. The defense is kind of coming together. You still got that hole at safety, but and you got all these young cornerbacks who are going to battle it out in camp to see who's starting opposite Slay. Sorry. Where do you see this team now? Is this a team that's expected to compete for the division?
I certainly think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they should be expected
Okay.
to compete for the division. Further beyond that, let's see. I think they can get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think they can maybe win a game, kind of the same as last year once they had gotten in.
Yeah.
It was just, they're a bit of a cupcake schedule there in the middle. They still had to win
Yeah.
those games, but I think this team could do something similar. 10, 11 wins maybe, depending on Jalen Hurts' play.
Of course.
And,
I mean, and you have to think like you're shoring up the offensive line. The offensive line is good. Now you bring him a legitimate number one receiver. What does that do to his production? What does that do to his play? Can we expect a jump from him? I think the Eagles are certainly hoping for one.
I think, if I were to bet on it, I would bet on Jalen Hurts making a leap, just because he's a guy who didn't really have a lot of stability throughout his college career,
Right.
and then obviously he's only been a pro for a year. To come back to the same team, same coach,
Yep.
there is some true value in that, and you upgrade around him,
Yeah.
and arguably one of the best lines in the game,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
he's gonna have no excuses left. A guy who never made excuses to begin
Right.
with, though, so it's
Yep.
it's a bit redundant, but overall you got to be absolutely stoked to not have targeted an entire positional group. It is what it is. They're undrafted free agents. They got a guy named Josh Jobe from Alabama that a lot of people are high on. Mario Goodrich out of Clemson, so they're gonna have some bodies there.
Yeah.
Again, similar.
They're gonna see what sticks, basically.
Said it in the past, to the Phillies signing those old, 30-something relievers to one-year deals and minor league deals and hoping one of them pans out. It's basically the Eagles' strategy with the secondary.
Yeah, except they're young. At the very least, they're
At
young.
least, yeah, several of them are young. I will give you that. And honestly, other than that positional group, I'm feeling pretty damn good about this team.
No, absolutely. Like from the defensive line, you got the linebacker situations.
Got a little bit of depth of linebacker, man.
Which we've never had in pretty much Howie Roseman's entire tenure. Like that's just never been a position that they had a lot of depth in. Now, they take a couple of picks. You got Kaiser White now. That's something that maybe that's a legit group in the NFL, that you can feel good
You
about.
know who's excited about it? This freaking guy.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that.
Watching Nakobe Dean run sideline to sideline in like 2 seconds.
That guy, eat, breathes, lives football, was calling out the plays in the championship game. We finally have that type of guy at the linebacker position. Are you kidding me? These guys and their personalities, these Georgia guys, and A.J. Brown, all three of these dudes are just about their business and about being the best possible player they can be, and just, personality-wise, it's pretty...
It seems like they mesh pretty well. They're going to come in and mesh pretty well.
Pretty remarkable turnout.
Yeah.
For, okay, going into the draft, what were your expectations? How could anybody be like, this exceeded my expectations?
Yeah.
Because if it didn't, I don't know what else you could have been
exactly.
hoping for.
Right. Now, obviously, when you trade all those picks, the back end of the draft, you're not going to get a lot of those lottery chances, as we like to call them, where we've seen some good pieces come out of.
And I like having late round picks. I like, falling in love with, 5th, 6th, 7th round guys.
Of course. Who doesn't? But, the opportunity to add premier talent was just too much to pass up. And that's just going to bring us into a really exciting, training camp season for the Eagles. That's something I think the whole city is ready for.
Absolutely. And we'll have, we're going to come down off the Eagles for a little bit.
Yeah.
We hadn't talked about them much leading up to the draft, but they get a little bit of love from us now.
Yeah.
And, once the more important, more pressing stuff has been attended to, we'll get back to them.
Absolutely. Do you want to finish off with a little bit of Phil's roundup?
A little bit of baseball here we got to talk about. A team that seems possibly destined to underperform. That would be the Philadelphia Phillies. We have a lingering Bryce Harper injury. We have a bit of a gut check following the Sixers clinching win. We were no hit collaboratively by the New York Mets.
That's tough.
That and the Embiid injury was truly, was there ever a better, 48 hours of emotion for true Philadelphians than that? I mean, that was just so on brand. It was comical. It was parody at that point. But hey, we took it on the chin and we're moving forward. But Philadelphia Phillies here. Talk to me about Bryce. Talk to me about the team. Talk to me about Joe Girardi. Talk to me about, can this team make the playoffs? Wherever you want to go.
I mean, it's early days. We're still we're officially a month into the season now, right? They're going to hover around 500, I think, depending on what happens with this Mets game. Hopefully they can pull that off. If they do, you get a little momentum. You win that series. Kyle Schwarber's starting to hit the ball a little bit better. That's something that I think can ease the pressure of Bryce. He's been dealing with this injury stuff on and off. At some point, you probably look at trying to rest him and trying to get him fully healthy. But it's just such early days now. I'm not really sure where they're at with that.
Yeah, seems like a bit of a touch and go for now.
Absolutely, but I'm my mindset right now is just I'm in a wait and see pattern because this team is still got a lot of moving parts. It seems like Bohm is now solidified as the third base. If he can get he's played well to start the season, that's encouraging. Schwarber, if he gets going, that was a big red flag, right? He was hitting under 200. He probably still is, but if he can start getting going, that's something where I think eases the pressure of these other guys down the lineup. And they just got to start hitting more, They can't get no hit. That's the one thing, right?
That's real shitty.
You can't get no hit.
Let's be honest. This lineup getting no hit
is fucking...
To the Mets.
Yeah. It leaves a real bad taste in your mouth.
That was real. That sucked ass. That should be linked up. That one tasted particularly bad.
Yeah. But we came back next next night got the win, right?
Barely got the win, I
They're
guess.
battling tonight.
Put up a couple, whatever. I think as weird as it is, this team had so much depth and so much pop going into the year,
Yeah.
and they're like so desperately missing Bryce just being good.
Yes.
You know, as like he was so good last year,
Yeah.
and they're not even getting, you know, it seems like close to half of that right now.
Mhm.
And you would think that, oh, they can pick up the slack. Look at all these guys that they signed, the Kyle
You would
Schwarbers,
think,
the
right?
JT Realmutos, yeah, the Reese Hoskins. Nobody really is. You know, Schwarber's starting to warm up, as you mentioned, at least, you know, hitting more home runs. But you know, Didi, Reese, Gene Segura, they're all playing fine.
Mhm.
And Alec Boehm seems to be the only true bright spot.
Yeah.
You
Time to
floated
trade him.
You floated trading him, and I gotta say,
Yeah.
Cream,
It's time.
I mulled it over for a
Absolutely.
second. I was like, no, but you could make an argument that I'd be willing to listen to because
Yeah.
this guy has come out and been the only
Yeah.
bright spot
Yeah.
consistently.
Yes.
And, you know, striking while the iron's hot, doing it. Maybe you parlay him into something that gives us the juice we need somewhere else. I don't
That's
know.
my
Can you give me
mindset.
your mindset and where his numbers are?
His numbers are pretty good. He's hitting over 300. He's not got I think 2 home runs. So, you know, his slugging percentage is okay. He's got the highest OPS on the team, which is not great. That's not what you want. Yeah, it's good for him, but it's not great for the team. The rest of these guys, Hoskins, Realmuto, Castellanos is pretty good. And then Schwarber, of course, and Bryce, like you said. All those guys need to step it up. Bohm, I'm like, he's a square peg in a round hole at third base. He's never going to be even an adequate third baseman. He's obviously destined to be a first base / DH player long term. Now, because of the way the roster is and the way we've stockpiled those players, we don't have any room for him there. So we got to shove him out to third base where he's going to continue to make mistakes. He's going to continue to cost us runs. And the big thing last year was like, well, his bat was so bad that you couldn't trade him anyway if you wanted to. Now he's hitting better. He's got a little bit of that trade value back. You ship him off somewhere for either like maybe a third, fourth starting pitcher, some depth, maybe a utility infielder that can play third base a little bit and provide some pop like with the platoon situation. That just makes the most sense in the world to me. But that, you know, if he keeps hitting like this, I get why you want to keep him because he's playing really well right now. It seems like long term, something's going to have to be done with him.
Would you rather hold on to him or Reese Hoskins?
I mean, I guess him, but I just think he has more value trade wise than Hoskins.
Yeah.
So you're kind of committed to Hoskins right now. I'm not sure what you could get for him. So he's like if you wanted to make a trade in season, he's the piece. He's the piece that you would use to do that.
Do you think a trade for this team? I don't even know what is their biggest
sure,
problem
yeah,
right now.
No,
It's just
you wouldn't do it right now. You would, you know,
the pitching's actually been decent. The starting pitching,
Yeah.
at least, which has been encouraging. And
Yeah, I
it's
agree.
the fact that the starting pitching has been pretty good, and you're, you know, a
Still
game
bad,
below
yeah.
500 is very. It jumps off the page in terms of concerns.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. But you look at Zach Wheeler, who's still getting going. You look at, you know, dealing with this Bryce situation. I think you try to hold down the fort. You come back in a month. You see where you are in the standings. If you're a few games above 500, that's great. And then you go from there. That's my mindset. It's a long season, Jake. I don't know if you knew this. They play a lot of these games.
Yeah, they tell me it's too long.
And they tell me I mean, they're not wrong. I think we gotta just take our slow with this Phillies team. You know, like let's pump the brakes, see where they are in a month, and make our decisions there. I'm not saying we should trade him tomorrow, of course. Like he's playing, you know, he's playing outstanding. You want to see if this continues.
Let me throw this at you. What
Yeah.
are the odds that the Philadelphia Phillies do not have any All-Stars? Because right now I'm not
0%.
getting any All-Star
0%.
vibes from this team. And I need to say that.
No, there's 0% chance we don't.
You know how much money we're paying for this team? And
Yeah.
we're not having any All-Stars?
We're
No
gonna-
All-Stars?
We're gonna have multiple All-Stars.
We're gonna have multiple All-Stars.
Bryce Harper
I don't
and
think
JT
about that.
Realmuto are gonna be All-Stars. I guarantee.
JT Realmuto usually is the guy. He's been. Thankfully, we've had him because at least we haven't gone without sending a
Bryce
representative.
Harper's gonna be an All-Star as well. He's gonna.
You tell me right now, Bryce Harper Harper and JT Realmuto are going to be
They're
all-stars
both
this year.
gonna be all-stars
Okay,
this
then we
year.
don't really have much to worry about with this team. Those guys are going to pick it up big time in a big
Yeah.
way.
Or at the very least, they're going to be voted in by the fans.
Well, we're gonna have to come back and check on these Phillies.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot these past 3 days.
Yes.
I got to tell you, we waited the appropriate amount of time to have this conversation
Agreed.
because we were able to have this conversation with the most amount of information.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to do. That's what podcasting's all about. It's about timing. Just like real estate, it's all about timing. A little bit about location,
Of
but
course.
you can usually work that out now with all the technology. So let me tell you, it's been just a real pleasure talking to you tonight. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I feel like we had some good breakdowns. Excited for the Miami Heat to get their mouths punched in Game 1.
Game 1. That's the one you got to steal.
That's the one, man. That's the one. It's a must win.
Do you have a breakout performer for Game 1 for us?
I think it's got to be Tyrese Maxey. I think you got to look to him. I mean, it's unfair but
everything up to this point, he's done.
He's done it.
I don't know if he can do it this series. About Joel being like, "Hey man, you're gonna have to level up again." I just don't know. I actually think that he won't, and I think it's gonna be on Harden.
Yeah.
It'll be on his shoulders, and if he has a terrible James Harden 2 for 13 game,
it could
that's
also
gonna be
a defensive group effort, the way we saw in the second half versus Toronto, where it was just a really cohesive unit. The rebounding, like, finally they got the memo.
Tobias Harris, 12 boards.
12 boards. Tobias Harris, shout out. Like, finally they got the message that they all have to box out and all have to go at the rebounds.
And one guy stays for the long rebound.
Yes. Like, it could be that situation because we know Miami, for as good offensive players as they have, they're not immune to cold stretches, like poor shooting nights. We've seen it time and again. Like, this team is not, the Warriors by any means.
Yeah.
So.
Without a Kyle Lowry there to settle them,
Yeah.
Game 1's the one.
Yeah, I agree.
You go in there and you take it, and you
it.
get ready for the return of the MVP.
We saw Milwaukee go into Boston shorthanded, and they stole that game. They absolutely stole it right out from under them.
Historically bad performance for the C's, man.
Yes.
Love to see it.
Love
to see it.
to
Never
see it.
believed in them.
On that happy note, let's get out of here. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you again next week when the Sixers are up 2-0 and Joel Embiid is coming back for you. Thank you very much, guys.